I just cannot use Neovim. If you're anything like me, sometimes you'll encounter a manual task that just feels like there has to be a better way to do things. If you have the mind of an engineer, the very idea of a repetitive task itself can feel insurmountable, more difficult than spending several hours designing and creating a way to automate a task that otherwise would take you 30 minutes to do. This experience is pretty widespread, especially if you're a programmer. And as you may or may not be aware, I am a programmer. I'm also an IT person, a systems administrator, if you will, though my job title has not changed in half of my career. But we'll move on past that. As an IT person, you'll very often get orders from the Almighty, the one who signs your paychecks, that is, telling you, hey, the client is asking us to go into their Microsoft 365 tenant. We need you to go into each. I know they have 1,000 users, but I need you specifically, I need you to do 2 hours of overtime to click on 100 different doctors from 100 different offices. And I need you to add DDS to the end of their last name with a colon. Don't forget the colon. Otherwise, you will be fucking incinerated. And you do. You're forced to sit down, do overtime, stare at your screen in the darkness because the sun set early because it's winter. You get off at 6, but I have to get off at 8, and the day's basically almost over. All the companies are closing. Your friends are all going to bed because you have to click 3 buttons and update the job titles. Not even the job titles. You're updating the last names of 100 different people. Why aren't we using the job titles? I don't know. It's not my job to know. Now, but tell me, dear blue collar underwater welding oil rig worker, would you rather sit down for 2 hours manually clicking these 3 buttons and typing in DDS, enter, and then save for 100 people, or would you rather do one thing, the one thing that brings you joy in life? Of course, as the oil rig work you are, that is risking your life underwater to fix the pipeline that is stopping John Rockefeller's great-grandson from purchasing his 14th company write-off yacht. The latter is actually what it feels like working as the only programmer at an IT company. Now, I haven't even scratched the surface of my problems in Neovim, and I've been talking for a little while. So let's start. Setting up and working with a functioning, customized version of Neovim is far, far more complicated than any 96-hour shift on an oil rig. It is especially far longer than any 96-hour shift in general. Now, you may say, well, just use LazyVim. I tried. And LazyVim is the worst of both worlds. It is configured, but it is configured in a way that is annoying. And thus that ruins the entire point. That is the downside of overly opinionated software. And I'm sure LazyVim is perfect for 95% of average users, and I am just not one of them. I am an Arch Linux user, and yes, I am contractually obligated to tell you this, but it is also somewhat relevant to what I just said. I know what it's like to install an Arch distro from scratch. If you've done that before, you know why this is relevant. I've labored in the coal mines of manually setting up Arch partitions on my disk with valuable data that I just had not yet backed up. And there's nothing I love more on this planet than Arch Linux, second only to generating revenue for my shareholders. And, Neovim isn't just easy. It isn't just easy. It's not easy at all. Neovim isn't easy. It isn't featured. Obviously, it's just Vim. Neovim is just Vim with outstanding plugin support. And the project itself is great, but it's just not great for me. I'm also a Lua programmer, so nobody in this field is going to record my opinion on this highly. In fact, I use VS Code, and I know this is a terrible sin to admit out loud, especially in the programming community, but please understand, I want to use Neovim. I want to use it. I really do. But VS Code and editors like it, like IntelliJ IDEA, just have something that Neovim does not. It has an easy-to-use interface that is customizable and well customized by default. And I don't use the word interface as in like a clicky interface, because I use Vim motions. I mean just like something. I mean something, But unlike LazyVim, VS Code's opinionated posturing doesn't actively harm my projects and my workflow. And I have plenty. I have plenty to complain about VS Code, but I don't even want to scratch the surface of that today. Just boil down all of my arguments against VS Code to Boomer Zoomer yelling at a native JavaScript application. And as I mentioned, VimMotions is one of the greatest utilities ever created for development. I'm trying not to use my hands too much. For many years, I mastered the control arrow, honing my craft to control shift left arrow, control shift, control Z, control R, and to scroll around with my mouse. But after just 1 year of using VimMotions, I'm working probably 10 to 50% faster than I did without them. And I don't want this art. I don't want this to become the 15,000th VS Code versus Neovim comparison out there, though I've already truly started down that path. I know almost every micro gripe I have with Neovim would be met with, Alex via Neovimman saying, there's a plugin for that. And though I may not have known about this or that plugin, therein lies my point. Neovim's plugin system, even with Lazy, not LazyVim, just Lazy, it's a plugin that is like a package manager, is flawed because Neovim itself, and just Vim itself, feels incomplete. It's just substantially missing something that makes it more than just a notepad with motions, like with Vim motions. Neovim also makes it inconvenient to install packages because there's no interface, there's no centralized repository. Neovim has an ecosystem, on top of this, has an ecosystem designed around micro packages that solves single minor problems. It is just like JavaScript. It's just like the JavaScript ecosystem. And worst of all all of these things, most packages assume a minimal configuration state, avoiding any opinionated approach that might displease some at the cost of overcorrecting so it just pleases nobody by default. And if you ever have a minor inconvenience with Neovim, just solve it. Just add another plugin. And this idea isn't terrible. It's what makes VS Code good. But when you have an ecosystem of micro packages that solve micro problems combined with zero opinionation and an inconvenient configuration and installation system, you just beget insanity from gruffy blue-collar workers like myself. LazyVim isn't terrible. Neovim isn't awful, and it's in fact far from it. And Vim was a great piece of software and still is to this day. But these programs just have a substantial upfront cost associated with getting one good configuration going and then never letting go. Because if you let go, or God forbid, somehow you lose your config, you are going to spend 10 hours customizing your software again. In other words, you are going to spend 10 hours engineering a single-digit percentage speed gain to a project that would have taken 2 hours to complete in the first place.